Okay, hi all. I'm just going to talk you through some extra processing techniques, and we're going to be focusing on the fuzz guitar here and the processed guitar particularly. So let's start off with this fuzz guitar. Now there's a big problem with the fuzz guitar. If we go back into the track view, I've just opened up the fuzz view, the fuzz guitar in the track view, and as you can see, this is much louder. The waveform is much louder than here, and they're exactly the same parts, but they were clearly recorded at different volumes and different gain. Now we need to do something to address that, because if I were to play, just take this off of loop, I'm just going to turn it down because it might peak. I'm just going to play it here. We can see how loud it is there. If we go here, okay, that's not it's not really ideal. Sorry, I had a bit of the kick coming through there. Okay, so as you can see, they're two different in volume. Now we need to change that somehow. So we're going to normalize it, and normalization means we take the quietest part of a sound and make it as loud as it could possibly be without distorting. But obviously, if we were to normalize this clip, it wouldn't do very much. Let me show you what would happen. So if I process, apply effect, normalize level at 100%, so as loud as it can be without distorting, you can see it's done very little. It's almost done nothing because this is already so loud. But what we can do is if we split the clip, so I'm going to hold Alt on my keyboard, and that's going to give us the scissors. Going to cut that up, creating a separate track. Now if we process this and normalize this, you'll notice that'll bring the level right up. So that's normalized the level of that guitar to the loudest it could possibly be without distorting. So now they'll be comparably very similar. Fantastic. Okay, so now we can treat this as one track, whereas before we would have to have done volume automation or something similar to kind of level out those dynamics. If we now select both of those, right click, bounce to clip, that'll actually bounce them down together, so if we moved it left or right, it wouldn't have a bad effect. Here we go, it's just redrawing the waveform for us there. Okay, so they're now joined together so we can move them as one. So in the last tutorial we talked about panning them, doing automatic double tracking on that acoustic guitar to make it sound like it's going through the left and right. And so to make sure that we're kind of making sense with all our panning and making sure this double tracking guitar makes sense, we should also do it to the fuzz guitar. But we're going to do it a slightly different way. So that way we did it with the delay. This way we're going to do exactly the same process in terms of the fact we're still going to delay the signal ever so slightly, and one's going to go through the left and one go through the right, but we're going to do it in the track view. So if you right click on that track that you want to clone and press clone track, press OK, you can now see that we've got two fuzz guitars, and so I might call this one fuzz guitar left and this one might be fuzz guitar right. And the first thing to do is to pan it left, and then to pan this one, just scroll down a bit, make sure you've got enough workspace on the right hand side, there we go, and then fuzz guitar right. But now if I press play, you're still going to hear it right bang in the center. Okay, so it's still in the center of the mix. We can't hear two different signals. So what we need to do is we need to zoom right in using this bottom right hand control here, zoom in right in, even more so than that, and try and find somewhere in the waveform, and then all we're going to do is click and drag one over without snap on. Make sure snap to grid is off, remembering snap to grid's up there, and I've just moved it ever so slightly out of time. Let's see what that sounds like. So that's what it sounds like in the center, and then if we put it back in effect, fantastic. Okay, so that's given us a nice crunchy sound in both the headphone, or both sides, sorry, both channels, left and right. But it also gives us a bit of space in that middle of that mix to put our vocals in. Okay, so we've done that, and now we need to treat these also as a pair. So this is where you've got the disadvantage of cloning tracks, because you need to have to process them both the same. But what we're going to do is use the EQ. Now we've been talking about EQ in terms of the way that you can right click and insert it here. You can also use Sonar's inbuilt EQ by clicking and turning it on here, and it creates like a little graphic EQ, which is very similar to the way that this works. And like I said before, we want to use a high and low shelf to kind of, especially with a distorted guitar which has so much fuzz, so much kind of low end frequencies and so much high end toppy, a bit trebly frequencies, we want to be able to cut those out. So if we have a listen, this would be a slightly more meaty sound without cutting through piercing through the mix. Okay, so we've just cut out those high frequencies there, actually quite dramatically rather than turning down. We seem to have more cut them out, but that's certainly, by giving it the same shape, it's keeping that sound rounded. Right, so if we keep those switched on, and we'll just turn those down for a minute. Let's look at the process guitar. Let's have a little listen to that from the start, because that's how our track starts, so it's really important that we get this bit right. Okay, so we're working with that bit. So if we're thinking about how we're going to process it, we might also think that maybe automatic double tracking on this would also be a good idea, because it would give us a wide mix to start with, because as you can hear, it's kind of in the middle, in the center, in the middle, which is okay, but we want to give it a bit more excitement, a bit more interest. So we're going to do exactly the same thing. I'm just going to go back to the delay. Just remembering to turn that off. We're going to turn link off as well, because that means that the left and right hand side are both treated the same, but we want to turn it off. Go to about 47 millisecond delay, turn all these ones down, turn the mix down, turn this up. Okay, instantly more interesting. Now we also want to put some reverb on to give some space, because it gives it, and I'll show you what I mean by reverb. We just have a little listen. Just creates a tail at the end of that sound. Which really suits the way that the sound is kind of drawing in gradually and gradually and gradually. I like the sound as it is. We don't need to mix with it too much. We might turn the reverb down just a tad. But I think we could also do with a bit of an echo on that sound. So let's see what that would sound like if we put in our delay. And now we're going to use it as a traditional delay. But generally, when you're processing channel by channel, the reverb should be the last thing you process. We do things slightly differently on the master bus, but I'll explain that later. So we're going to keep the reverb as the last thing in our signal chain, because if you imagine your signal goes down, down, down into this delay, and then into the reverb, then gets turned up and turned down by that volume fader. So we're actually going to use it as delay. So let's see what kind of delay we can get out of this. So we just want to try and get a bit of an echo without being so obvious in the mix. As you can hear, it's kind of blurring it at the moment, and I don't think our tempo's synced correctly, but I think I tried one a bit earlier, and using the 2/3 option actually gave an interesting way of interesting delay time. And obviously we want to turn our mix right down, because we don't really want it to be that present, because the higher this mix, the more obvious the delay is. So we can turn it down slightly. It's just going to be ever so subtle in the background, but it still gives it that depth, that kind of shine that we're looking for. Okay, and so we might also put in the EQ again, and then turn in on this process guitar channel strip, and then we can turn the high frequency sounds just ever so slightly. Okay, so that's much more exciting than it sounded before, so I'll just do a comparison. So we've kind of spread it out a bit more in our mix. So that's sounding good. So let's now listen to everything we've got so far. and I'll do this the slightly quicker way. Just to accidentally pan that. If you ever turn something, turn a jog or a dial, one of these controls, if you do it at say 80%, but you want it to go back to 0, if you just double click on that, that's a little tip just to make sure that it goes back to the center. Right, let's go down, all the way down here, all the way to the end. Oh, if I hold shift, we should be able to select all of them. There we go. And the process guitar. Hold control, click solo. Seem to have lost our drums there. As you can see, when our fuzz guitar comes in there, it's really comes in quite loud. Let's have a listen without turn those back down. Because the function of the fuzz guitar in here, it's not like a rock track where it's meant to be like a main focus or a feature. It's just meant to be sitting in that background, thickening up that texture for when that chorus kicks in. Okay, so I'm just going to do a quick comparison with all the effects and no effects. Okay, we've also got some additional guitar and guitar effects in there. So we've got additional guitar track and a rhythm guitar, which is doing some little bits in the background, but we won't talk about those too much in tutorial. But do have a listen to them on solo. Do think about cutting out those high and low frequencies. In fact, I might just put in a shelf there. You can just do it that way if we want. Just get rid of those high and low frequencies just to clean up the sounds. And it's good practice to put these in where necessary. Hopefully that's our additional guitar track. Yeah, there we go. So things like that are really key places to kind of fill out with a bit of reverb, just so they blend more into that texture. So let's just put those reverbs in. You do want to think about the decay time and how it affects the rest of your mix, but I'm just going to slot it in and see what it sounds like. Great. Okay, so now we've processed all of the different guitars. Now we've made sure that we've cut off the not cut off but shelved the high and low frequencies just to turn them down ever so slightly. And now we're ready to kind of think about putting in our harmony vocals and thinking about the mix as a general whole. And I'm really excited to show you a bit about what we can do with the lead vocals and also what we can put on the master bus just to give it that extra bit of polish. Thanks for listening.